Our topics today were you can learn anything you want to, embarrassing yourself at a work event, decorations and illuminations, being inconspicuous, spiders, centipedes, and other creepy crawlies and how to remove them, complicated timetables or journeys by public transport, and too much weight. In the context of that is that Mum had a weighted blanket on a bed that there were some complaints that it was a bit too weighted and people couldn't turn over under it. So
I got trapped. I couldn't get out.
Got
Thank
some
you.
beautiful reads behind you.
Yes, I left them for the Christmas event thing before I put them away. Yes.
Yeah, same here. I've brought the Christmas tree in, especially, and after this I'll take it down. But I thought it could come along to the Christmas party.
That's right. Do like the antlers, most exciting.
Yeah, great antlers islands.
Back or forward? What's this?
Nice wreath, head wreath, Mum. Very good. Dad, do you just show your fly again? Because it's a really good fly.
Oh,
Hang on.
no. Oh, right.
You've got the swat to get it.
Like it.
It's actually called a one fly.
A one fly.
You've come as TARDIS. Why have you come as TARDIS?
Because that's camouflaged.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's camouflaged. Yeah.
As a police box.
Yeah. You're blending in really well as a police box at the Christmas party. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. So I've got a little poem for us called Anything You Want. It's about learning things. Some skills elude us over and over, scurrying just out of reach like slippery seeds on polished pine. We wonder, is it worth the worry, the hand-wringing, the frustration-wrought repetition? Should we return, like settling sands, to the known dunes and comfortable corners where our strengths and prior studies lie? Perhaps our purpose answers. What is it we're learning for? Does it matter if we cannot do this thing? If so, then we must press on. If not, then perhaps retreat is warranted and right, so long as we still know for sure that if we had to learn, we might.
Nice.
Nice. Rhymes.
Story is called Creepy Crawly Christmas Party. Florrie thought it was pretty unfair of work to give her, a mere undergraduate intern, the task of organising the office Christmas party. Sure, her degree was officially in event management, but she'd come here to try something different, not to book more DJs and caterers for awkward festive occasions. A little more guidance would have been nice at least. No one had told her that temps weren't meant to be invited, or that the all-staff email list inexplicably included people who worked at an entirely separate location and didn't really know the team at her branch. She couldn't exactly uninvite people she'd already sent the save the date to. Florrie's spatial reasoning was not her strong point, but even she had an inkling, standing in the large BBC office meeting room and looking around her, that the number of people she had emailed was not a number that would under any circumstances fit in here. She wasn't supposed to be hiring an external space, so she was going to have to improvise. She got out her colour-coded folder of internship notes and flicked to the floor plan of the building. Frowning, Florrie turned the folder around several times, trying to get her bearings, then headed for the lift. It looked as though there was a space in the lower level that was mostly open and used for people to do things with green screens and large props. Some of it might be being used as storage, but anywhere could be transformed with the right set of decorations and lights, Florrie knew. She emerged from the lift into some kind of basement corridor. Damn, she'd been hoping the doors would just open into the space she was looking for. Florrie glanced to either side of her, then picked a direction at random. It was no use trying to discern which way to go. She wound her way around until a door appeared ahead, pushed it open, and peered through. A stairwell. Where did those stairs even come out? She'd never seen the stairs. Now that she thought about it, that was probably supposed to have been covered in the fire safety induction. Florrie carried on along the corridor to the next doorway and looked through it. This time, she saw what she hoped was the space she was looking for. It had a polished concrete floor, some compactus storage units, and some tall metal frameworks and scaffolds that she assumed were normally used for sets and screens. The floor would make it chilly in here, but perhaps she could put some assorted rugs down if she could get the non-slip mats to go underneath. Florrie did a slow circuit. Some trestle tables folded against the wall behind the scaffolds would do nicely for setting out a buffet. She would have to find more for people to sit at, and chairs. As if answering her thoughts, a set of stacked chairs sat waiting behind a storage unit as Florrie peered into a gloomy corner. She moved closer to count them and let out a squeal as a reasonably large and very bristly spider crawled out of one of the crevices between the stacked seats. Florrie took a moment to breathe. UK spiders weren't dangerous, were they? She crept back towards the arachnid, considering what spider removal tools she had at her disposal. They amounted to the paper in her folder. The spider was currently sitting very still on the very edge of the chair, where it couldn't easily be captured under a jar or container, had Florrie, in fact, even had such an object. Florrie slid the front page of her internship contract out of the folder and flicked at the spider with the edge of the paper, hoping to persuade it to move. The arachnid clung stickily to the chair, then put one of its 8 legs onto the page and climbed onto the underside of the paper. Florrie could just see its shadow hanging there. "Hey," she told it out loud, "what are you doing?" She rotated the page carefully and moved toward a window. The spider decided that this free ride was no longer enjoyable and dropped from the paper like a small rock. Florrie screeched and let go of the contract, which fluttered to the floor. The page seemed to be laying flat on the concrete, so Florrie gingerly retrieved the paper by one corner. Now the spider was nowhere to be seen. After spending some time turning in circles, trying to check that it wasn't on her clothing, and scanning the floor around her, Florrie shrugged. "Just don't come out in the middle of the party, okay, Mr. Spider?" she told the space at large. While Florrie was doing her best to organise a space to fit everyone, her colleague, a temp named Amanda, was trying to convince her boyfriend Ivan to come along to the office party as her +1. "Come on, Ivan, it's going to be fancy. We can wear matching outfits. I don't want to be the one person who doesn't bring a date and ends up with no one to chat to if people pair up and dance." Ivan rubbed his nose and drew his eyebrows together. "Are you sure other people are bringing partners?" Amanda sighed. "Of course they will." She watched him for a moment, one eyebrow raised. "There'll be free food and drinks." "Oh, all right then." Ivan smiled. He paused. "I'm not driving though if there's free alcohol." Amanda folded her arms, resting newly lacquered nails against each elbow. "Well, how will we get there?" Ivan shrugged. "The train? Isn't there a station just near the building? It had to be some kind of marker of success when somebody rang you and asked you to attend their office event as a motivational speaker. At least that's what Zaman told himself when he hung up the phone from speaking to the young intern named Florrie. The risk, of course, of agreeing to such a thing for a BBC branch was that he would almost certainly be recorded in high definition and wouldn't be able to afford to make any silly mistakes. The other concern was that he really wasn't sure why they'd asked him. Apparently, this particular office was doing some kind of focus on lifelong learning, and they thought he would be a good person to talk about this because of his many changes in career direction and wildly varied qualifications. What they probably didn't understand, Zaman thought, was that what he demonstrated was not so much a devotion to lifelong learning as what you do when you try a lot of things and hate them all. But he thought he'd probably better keep that information to himself. There was plenty to tell about acquiring new skills and overcoming fears. That ought to be sufficiently motivating, right? Zaman cancelled a few things from his social plans for the week and prepared to spend his nights practicing being enthusiastic, engaging, and hopefully fun. After all, it was a party, not a conference. Florrie soon had to admit that setting up and running an event as large as what this party had become was not a one-person job. She enlisted the help of several fellow interns and 2 members of operations to tidy and decorate the large warehouse space. When Florrie explained that she wanted to hang Christmas light displays from the scaffolds and rafters, she learned that one needed a specific ladder training qualification to use anything larger than a 3-step stepladder. Luckily, the 2 staff members from operations had this prerequisite and seemed to quite enjoy following Florrie's directions. She figured setting up her lights and decorations probably beat unblocking out-of-order toilets or trying to work out what was wrong with the radiators this week. Some of the attempts at transforming the space were not going to plan, however. One of Florrie's favourite light displays consisted of a chain of Christmas-coloured lanterns, which were both inexplicably heavy and somehow not fixed firmly in position. Every time the line of them was strung across the rafters, they would sag down, no matter how tightly they were pulled. Then the lanterns would shift along the cord so they were bunched up, their weight accumulating in the middle like the frustrating clasp of a necklace that always turns to the front. Eventually, Florrie gave up on them being overhead and had them laid along the back of one of the buffet tables, which looked good, but did cause a slightly concerning bowing of the wooden trestle top, which Florrie chose to ignore. There was no sign of the spider as the chairs and tables were pulled out and arranged around the space. Florrie was glad of this, but a little disconcerted, wondering whether her 8-legged friend might be hiding somewhere. Still, she'd checked, and there were definitely no poisonous spiders in this part of the world. So if the arachnid was around here somewhere, it wasn't really a danger to anyone. The addition Florrie was most proud of was setting up the green screen as a photo booth, with a choice of backgrounds on a laptop for the staff to select from. They had proper lights, courtesy of the photography team, as well as a really good camera with a remote control and a box of props. The last thing to attend to was getting the food in. Florrie had arranged delivery on the night because they didn't have a big enough fridge in the office to store the food if it was dropped off early. The caterers were very reasonable about this, but advised that they could only send the driver and would need Florrie to assist with taking everything out of the truck and getting it down to the lower level of the building. That would be doable, Florrie reasoned. She enlisted some of the other interns to assist, letting the operations staff off the hook this time because, she reasoned, everyone who'd helped earlier would want to go and get changed. She completely forgot about her own attire until, whilst helping lift mini kegs onto the temporary bar, she popped a button off her blouse and got beer foam all down her front. Oh, right. She'd be expected to put on a dress, inevitably something she'd be freezing in. Luckily, being the kind of person who's used to getting lost on the way to places and having to get ready in the car or in the toilets on arrival, Florrie had a dress, hairbrush, and makeup in her rather bottomless handbag. She ducked out while the DJ was setting up, got lost in the corridors, found the lift, and returned to the office toilets to change. Whilst this was happening, Amanda and Ivan were waiting for a bus, wearing matching bright green outfits and huddling together under Ivan's coat. Why does it say the next bus is going to Netley? Worried Amanda, shivering. Because it is, replied Ivan. We have to change at Whitland Station and get on the tram train link. Amanda frowned. But it's the train that stops right near my work, isn't it? Ivan pulled up Google Maps. Yeah, it is. But trains don't go up here. They go round the ring road. He showed her on the map. So we have to go towards the town centre first and get on the train when it's going out of town. Amanda shook her head. Right. A bus pulled up and Amanda and Ivan got on. Could I just check we're on the right bus to get to Tandal Square? Ivan asked the driver. Yep. Get off at Whitland, walk down the road to the tram, jump on the green line, get off at Station Road. And you'll want to head over to platform 3 and get on the train heading to Possington. Tandal Square is the third stop. Amanda rolled her eyes as they settled into one of the seats. But your place is only 10 minutes from my work by car. We could have walked faster. Ivan glanced at her. Probably not in those shoes, though, he joked. Zaman was attempting to drive into the city. This was, of course, a dreadful idea, and he was already in a traffic jam on the outskirts, dodging nightclubbers and event attendees who were leaping out of taxis and cars that stopped without warning. If you were lucky, they pulled over. Mostly, the doors opened and the chilly-looking people went scurrying for the footpath without so much as a wave or a blink of hazard lights. Zaman was doing a lot of swearing, and he still had to find somewhere to park, which was going to cost a fortune. The closer he got to the event, the more inclined Zaman became to road rage. He even made some rude hand gestures at the driver of a car who pulled out and cut him off on the way into a covered multi-storey car park. Then he found himself stuck behind the same driver as they both wound their way around multiple levels without finding spaces. Finally, Zaman and the other driver parked within a few spaces of each other on the top level. A smartly dressed woman with a glittery black handbag got out of the other car and headed off in the same direction Zaman needed to go. So Zaman slid down in his seat and played on his phone for a few moments until she was out of sight. One couldn't make small talk with a person one had road raged at. Zaman had a quick look through his notes for his speech while he waited, and checked the lid of the bug box secreted in his bag for the 10th time. He hoped that the 2 centipede specimens would impress upon his audience how effectively he'd conquered his bug fear. But that didn't mean to say that he'd be especially comfortable if the mini beasts got loose in his car. Florrie made her way back into the party space, just as the branch manager, Lou, arrived, swinging a sparkly black handbag and looking important. Florrie smiled brightly at her and went through the arrangements she'd made for the evening, hoping it all seemed satisfactory. She thought it best not to go into detail about the reason for using this larger space. Hopefully, when all the guests arrived, it would be obvious and who could really blame her for inviting the whole staff mailing list? Florrie was hoping all the extra people would be fun and demonstrate why they should include everyone in these things. Presently, she spotted Zaman, the speaker she'd booked, hovering in the doorway. She gave him a welcoming beam and waved. "Oh, here's our motivational speaker," she told Lou. "If anyone knows lifelong learning, it's this guy." She headed towards him. Zaman looked a bit panicky, she thought. Hopefully that didn't mean he was going to mess it all up. Zaman watched the two approaching women in horror. The one who had waved was obviously Florrie. The other, who had fixed him with a narrow-eyed stare, was the driver he'd road raged at on the way in. Zaman was running various scenarios in his mind, wondering whether he should say something or pretend he'd never seen this person before. It was possible she didn't actually recognize him, wasn't it? He tried to look ordinary and inconspicuous, but he had worn a very distinctive tie covered in bright orange bugs. "Zaman, welcome," beamed Florrie. "I'm Florrie, who you spoke to on the phone, and this is Lou, our branch manager." Zaman winced and shook hands sheepishly. Trust him to have given the boss the finger. "Please help yourself to any drinks or food that you fancy," Florrie went on. Zaman nodded. He would certainly be helping himself to some drinks at the first opportunity. "Will you be needing any tech support, any videos or slides to show or anything like that?" Florrie asked. Zaman explained that he wanted to show a video of skydiving and a few pictures, and would like to play some music while he talked about techniques for remaining calm in unfamiliar situations. Florrie introduced an IT guy who looked annoyed that his help was required during a festive event, and Zaman's laptop was inspected and linked up to a projector in the sound system. Florrie took the sound cable out so that the DJ could keep playing Christmas songs, but Zaman's desktop background of him jumping into a pool with an inflatable flamingo was left on the projector screen. Zaman made his way to the bar. Amanda and Ivan arrived 20 minutes later than expected because no one had told them that some of the Possington trains were express and would not stop at Tandle Square, even if they did complain loudly to the carriage guard. Finally, they made their way into the BBC building and down in the lift, and followed the sound of Christmas music and chatter to the big warehouse space. It was brilliantly decorated, with Christmas-coloured drapes over the walls, a long red rug on the floor, real pine branches making a wonderful smell, and some pretty spectacular light displays across the ceiling. What Ivan noticed very quickly, however, was the fact that most of the staff members were on their own. "You said I wasn't going to be the only partner here," he hissed to Amanda, shuffling back towards the drapes in an attempt to be less noticeable. This was, as it happened, very effective, as the green of the outfits he and Amanda had chosen was a very close match for the green parts of Florrie's decorations. Both Ivan and Amanda almost disappeared against a green section of wall hanging. "Oops," murmured Amanda, looking awkward. "I guess we weren't supposed to bring dates." "Don't worry," answered someone whose red Christmas jumper had disguised them against an arrangement of red bows, leaving them unnoticed by Amanda and Ivan. "I think there'll be plenty of room in here, no matter how many +1s turn up. I heard this was meant to be all upstairs, but Florrie didn't know that temps and West Office crew weren't supposed to be invited, so she had to set up a bigger space." Amanda, who had been startled at first, now sagged a bit. "I am a temp," she admitted. They were prevented from further discussion of who might be an imposter by the sound of Lou, the manager, on the microphone. "Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see you all looking festive. Before we proceed to eat, drink and be merry, Florrie has kindly arranged for Zaman Demir to entertain and motivate us with some words on our office focus of lifelong learning. As someone who's worked in 6 different fields with 6 different areas of necessary experience, Zaman certainly has a lot of ongoing learning behind him, and I'm sure we can all learn something from his experience. Although, having parked alongside him this evening, I don't recommend anyone choose him as a driving instructor. Zaman can help you if you're interested in fitness, history, investments, or bugs of the crawly or computer variety. And I'm sure he's still learning about yet more areas. So let's give Zaman a warm welcome. The crowd clapped as Zaman crept across the floor, a glass of champagne in one hand and his bag of props in the other. Zaman fired up his slide with the title of his speech on his laptop and spun to face the waiting staff, flinging his hands wide in an excited gesture of welcome. Unfortunately, Lou was still standing at the microphone, and Zaman's gesturing left hand connected with her tall and elaborate hair updo. Thus, instead of opening with "Hello and happy holidays" as planned, Zaman had to begin with a lot of "terribly sorry about that" and "fair point about the driving." When eventually he was settled and Lou was safely out of the range of dramatic hand gestures, Zaman took a sip of his champagne and looked out at the assembled staff. "Hi," he announced. "I'm Zaman, and I'm here to tell you that you can learn anything you want to, even when learning something means dealing with some of your greatest fears." There were some skeptical looks, which Zaman expected. "Yes, I see you not believing me. So let me give you an example. I've never been a big fan of heights. Who else doesn't like heights?" Quite a few people tentatively raised their hands. "This is me when a friend made me go abseiling." Zaman showed them a picture of himself with a cliff edge behind him and a completely terrified expression. There were a few laughs. But one day, I decided that I wanted to be able to lead hikes up some of the tallest mountains in the world. Why? Who knows, but I did. So I had to learn loads. Fitness stuff, first aid, what kind of gear is required, and of course, how to not pass out when I saw over the edge of a valley. I can see some of you wondering, but why, Zaman? Why didn't you just choose something easier? Well, later on, I did, and that's why I'm not up a mountain right now. But first, I wanted to conquer this thing. And you can too. So one of the most important tools is just learning ways to relax when you start to get frustrated or scared. I'm going to show you 2 of my favorites. Zaman hauled a yoga mat and a weighted blanket out of his bag. The party guests looked at each other. They hadn't come dressed for yoga or blanket forts. Zaman, with difficulty, waved the weighted blanket a bit. "This here is a weighted blanket, and it's magic," he declared. "It's a bit like a hug in a rug. When I was preparing to go on mountain expeditions, I would sit with this on while I watched videos of the high routes that I'd have to take, and I'd be able to stay calm. The other thing that I did was a little bit of yoga. Nothing fancy, don't worry. I'm not flexible at all." He spread out the yoga mat and knelt down. "Whenever I'm feeling frustrated by something I just can't quite get the hang of, this is what I do. I stop trying for a few minutes and I get down on the floor and I rest in child's pose." He demonstrated. "You can join in if you like," he added. A couple of people awkwardly found bits of red rug to kneel on and teetered down from high heels or unbuttoned their waistcoats to mimic Zaman. Most of them stayed standing. Zaman remained face down on the mat for what seemed like a very long time. People began to shift their feet and glance around. Eventually, the few who'd got down on the floor sat up and looked around. "I think he's asleep," one of them hissed. They were saved the awkwardness of having to poke Zaman awake, however, because suddenly a shriek erupted from the corner and Amanda materialized from where she'd been camouflaged against the green drapes. She was running about, swatting at herself and pulling off the garments on her upper body until she'd stripped all the way down to her bra. "Spider, spider!" Amanda screeched, most of her dress hanging around her hips. "Where is it?" asked Florrie, stepping confidently forward with a pint glass and a coaster and peering at the upper half of Amanda as though she was something under a microscope. "There it goes," shouted someone else, pointing under the trestle table. Zaman had sat up and was looking about a little bit furtively. As Florrie pursued the spider on hands and knees, he stood up. "Another thing I used to find really scary, just like many of you, I'm sure, was any kind of creepy crawly," he told them. "But do you know what field I work in now?" Those in the audience who were still paying attention looked at each other. Someone was helping Amanda put her clothes back on in the corner, and she'd been handed a paper plate, which was now being loaded up with a bit of everything. "I study bugs," Zaman announced. "Why, you might ask? Well, after my mountain climbing experience, I realized that the things I'm scared of actually get less scary for me the more I learn about them. So I thought, maybe if I learned all about creepy crawlies, they'd have less power over me. And I was right. Nowadays, I see these kind of critters every day." He pulled out his bug box in which the 2 different species of centipede were running about in agitation. "And it's not so different from having a pet at home, except these guys normally hang out in a tank in my lab." The audience were peering forward, some of them grimacing, some looking intrigued, and others trying to hide behind their colleagues. "So," Zaman concluded dramatically, setting the video of himself skydiving running on the projector, "believe me, you can learn anything you want, even things you would never imagine trying because they scare you. All it takes is patience, perseverance, and knowing how to calm yourself down when you get too frustrated or too scared to learn effectively. So if there's something you want to learn, get out there and try. I believe in you. Thank you." He gestured grandly at them all to emphasize these final words. Unfortunately, he forgot that he was still holding the bug box.
Oh.
It flew from his hand like a well-aimed snowball and splattered on the floor in much the same fashion, the lid exploding off and the occupants of the box immediately setting out to enjoy their newfound freedom at speed. They were a little bit too close to Zaman's feet for him to retain his composure. "Whoa!" he went, staggering backwards under the now disillusioned gaze of his audience. That is, those among the audience who were not also fleeing from the tiny creatures on the floor. Amanda's piled up paper plate, suffering under the weight of a bit of everything, slowly capsized from her right hand as she frantically used her left to make a shooing motion at the mini beasts. Ivan might have been with her, but no one was quite sure in the confusion due to the way he matched the curtains. "All right, everybody stay calm," called a flustered Florrie. "UK centipedes are not poisonous. They're not going to do you any harm. We just need something big to catch that long one in. Who has a lunch container?" Between them, Florrie and one of the members of the operations team managed to retrieve Zaman's wriggly props in a couple of Tupperware boxes. Meanwhile, Zaman, who had staggered backwards, leaned on a trestle table for support. Unfortunately, it was the trestle that already held the very heavy lantern display and a large bowl of punch, and the fold-out legs, already struggling, gave up. Florrie looked around at the mess and sighed. "Okay, anyone who doesn't want to leave after all that, please pick up some food and drink of your choice and relocate to the meeting room." She handed Lou a centipede in a lunchbox. "Zaman, why don't you pack up your things and come upstairs for a sit-down under your magic blanket?" The assembled crowd of staff and Zaman, stunned, did as she said. The next day, a predictably large number of people phoned in sick. Florrie, who had had no illusion that she could get away with drinking once Zaman's speech started, went in to attend to the clean-up. She found herself in an office that looked very unlike itself. Lou was standing in the doorway, looking dishevelled, and staring in bemusement at Rod from the operations team, who was on the floor. It took Florrie a moment to see the man because he was under Zaman's weighted blanket, which matched the carpet. She joined Lou in peering down at him. Rod opened his eyes. "Help," he said, nodding his chin at the blanket. "It's too heavy." Lou slowly rolled the weighted blanket off of their colleague, while Florrie went to answer the phone, which had been ringing since she walked in. "Hi," said a worn-out voice. "It's Amanda. I don't think I can make it in today." Florrie sighed. "You and everyone else. What shall I tell Lou?" "Well," started Amanda hesitantly. "You know, Ivan and I were going home on public transport." Replied Florrie, even though she didn't. "Well, I think we got on the wrong connection. We're in Wales." "Ah," answered Florrie. I'll say it's for personal reasons." Florrie had a look at the photo booth pictures, which included a lot of Amanda and Ivan looking like disembodied heads due to their outfits matching the green screen. After a few minutes of this, she turned to find Zaman standing at the door. "Ah, hello," she said, trying not to sound annoyed or amused. "Hi, Florrie." "Hi, Lou," Zaman murmured. "I'm sorry my speech kind of derailed your party." "Definitely more than an intern's job," Florrie muttered. To Zaman, she said, "Don't worry, these things happen." "I came for my blanket," Zaman said, moving awkwardly towards Lou, who was trying to pick the blanket up and struggling. "And my centipedes." Florrie stared at him. "You didn't get your centipedes back?" All three of them looked slowly around the office, eyes widening. Interrupted Rod from operations, who had just returned from the loo. "Are you looking for these?" He held out 2 boxes with centipedes in them. Everyone else breathed a sigh of relief. "Where were they?" Florrie demanded. "In the urinal," answered Rod. Florrie regretted asking and let Zaman take hold of the creepy crawly containers himself. "Well," sighed Lou, "I think we all might have learnt enough lessons for this particular week of our lives." Zaman nodded. "May I amend my speech?" he asked. "In what way?" Florrie crossed her arms, fed up. "Well, just to say, you can learn anything you want to, but if you hate it, you can always learn something else. Because that's the point of lifelong learning, really. You can adapt. You can always change your focus." Florrie smirked at him. "Time to move on from bugs, is it, Zaman?" She laughed. Zaman nodded sheepishly, tucking his centipedes and his blanket back into a large duffel bag. "Yeah," he replied. "I think it might be time for field of work number 7.
Very nice.
Beautiful. Very relatable.
I've got my juice in my wine glass because
Oh, very nice.
I'm at the office party, so you know. I have this.
Happy office party, happy anniversary, Jane and Andrew.
Yes.
Anniversary.
Wow, that's making wonderful
Nice.
tones when you're doing your cheers. Anyway, and any requests for our next story, which will be the concluding story for our 4th year.
Oh my God.
Goodness. I think you could do something on disastrous cakes that don't turn out like you want them to and have to be repaired.
In a recent experience.
Referring to my dessert.
No, I'm certainly not. No,
Good.
no. I'm just thinking of, you know, having to make a cake do a particular thing and it doesn't.
Or mail order gifts that are totally
Oh yeah, inappropriate mail order gifts would be a good one. I've been really good at that.
Sarah, I love the description of the weighted blanket thing because that is pretty funny. Because I've got a weighted blanket, Barry's got one, they're 7 kilos and they're beautiful. But I thought when Barry was first, like, oh, this it really settles you down, helps you sleep. So I got, this is for those of you who don't know, I ordered a queen size one and it weighs 12 kilos. But unlike the others, it's not a bamboo cover, which is beautiful, soft, silky feel. It's a kind of velour cover, and it makes you very hot. But it also weighs just a little bit too much. And I thought, oh, well, it's a freezing night. Jane and Andrew are coming. I'll put it on their bed. It'll help them settle down. Well, Andrew got up in the morning and said, do you want to?
That was interesting. I felt like I was in well, I was being wrapped like a swaddling mummy type.
Mummy.
In a sarcophagus.
And he couldn't turn over in bed, he went.
Couldn't flip.
And you know, just that thing of, you know, I mean, another thing you could pop in the story is that like domestic techniques that you used to, and they just don't work in a given situation.
When like you
So
were
that
like
thing of like flinging
fling
out
it.
the pillow cover and it settles on the bed.
yeah.
You try that with a weighted blanket, it just isn't the thing. Yeah.
Sounds like you need to use it for your strength work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quite like the getting lost on the public transport.
Yes.
That was a really funny one.
Could relate.
I know somebody when I was catching the train from Hedge End when I used to work there, one day one of the people who did sort of theatre tech type stuff drove me to Eastleigh because it was very late and there were not many more trains from Hedge End. And on the way told me about having fallen asleep on a train and the train gone all the way back to like the train depot and he woke up like early hours of the morning because some like cleaners and guards were coming along. Oh, there's a person still on the train.
Talking about the cakes,
Yes.
there's a cake show on Netflix that's very funny where they get 3 contestants come in and they have to make a cake or a confectionery item.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely hilarious because none of them look like what they're supposed to be doing. It's so funny.
So they have
So
to try and make it look like a particular thing.
Cake.
They make a Eiffel Tower out of cake.
Yes.
Right.
And they show you one. This is what you're making, and they have to go back and make it. And it's funny.
So they're completely inexperienced bakers. It's
Yes.
lay people, and they give them a recipe and say it should look like this, and it never does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very funny.
That sound good.
You just put those down.
Perhaps you should have a competitive element to that cake.
Yeah.
Barry's
A cake making competition.
sort of put Margaret's thinking with it.
I think another one you could do is losing your car in a car park.
Oh, that's good.
Very
Oh,
easy to
no one
do.
likes that. Yeah.
One time I did the one that's at the railway station in town. And what happens is there are 2 identical type car parks
Oh yeah.
above the railway station. They are, and if you, I parked the car, I got off, and I went and did what I want to do. When I came back, I went to the wrong car park without realising. And it's laid out exactly the same. The ramps
They're
are
looking in the same
desks are
place
the same.
in an
And my
identical,
car wasn't
but your
there.
car's not there, yeah.
Where's my car? I thought I parked it here on this level, in this spot, but I was in the wrong car park.
It was lucky you didn't ring the police.
It was, yeah, about the stolen car.
Yeah.
When I went down the escalator and out the door, I realised, oh, there's another doorway. Right car park.
I had a similar thing with my mum. One roasting hot lead up to Christmas. It was about 38 degrees. We'd gone into our day.
Oh, that's
going
right. I
to
think
work.
you brought this story up when we did the bad dates
That's right.
episode. Yeah, trying to meet
Or we
someone.
arranged, just for everyone else, we arranged to meet at the Bank SA on Pulteney Street. And there are two, or there were two. And Mum had gone to one and I'd gone to the other, and we'd both been walking up and down and going off to have a look at things and coming back absolutely fuming with each other. And when we met, yo, where have you been? You know, beg your pardon, that kind of thing. And yeah, one of those awful things where, yeah, it's hard to retreat from. It's a bit like the chap in the story with his sounding off and giving the finger to the wrong person sort of thing. It's hard to back down when you're that cross. You realise it's a mistake, no one could help it. We didn't have mobile phones and things to
You couldn't
say.
say,
I'm
right,
at
yeah.
the corner of Rundle Street and, Pulteney. Speaking of which, the lost skill of making an arrangement to meet someone because it's
Without
so
being
easy
able
now,
to communicate. Yeah.
without your mobile, it's so easy now to say, look, I'm waiting outside by the letterbox.
Yeah, you just tell them where you are, yeah.
But you used to actually wear a wristwatch, not Fitbits, but wristwatches.
3 o'clock on the corner of this road and that one, or
Yeah. And if I'm late this, and if not, I'll head for this. But you have to have
contingency plans, yeah.
And all those things are thrown into complete disarray when things like street numbers are not consistent. Never travel down, I think it's Crossroad.
Yeah.
Because the numbers change. They're not sequential. They're totally out of sync. So there are several 256s. There are, and they don't follow sequence at all. They change when they swap suburbs.
How do they get delivery?
It's quite alarming. Quite alarming. So
Truck
when you
must
drive,
come along and be like, oh, it's 256 and it's the wrong business.
It's not. And the numbers don't go the way you expect them to. It's happened a few times when we've gone to places. There was somewhere I was going to go to a band rehearsal I hadn't been to before, and I couldn't find the house because the numbers on the street weren't like you expected. Like normally it goes on one side 2468, on the other side 137. This was all over the place. Like number 7 was round the corner on another street.
Maybe add around the corner, Sarah.
Around the corner.
Around the corner. What hides around corners? What's that?
And what do people mean when they say something is around the corner?
Around the corner.
Yeah. Because usually people say it just to mean it's close by, don't they? But
yeah.
The other thing seems to be avoided is the number 13.
Oh, because people think it's bad luck, so there is no number 13.
Yeah, the flat apartments go 10, 11, 12, 12B, 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, superstitions with numbers. Yeah.
Number superstitions, yeah.
Or socks.
Or anything.
Jumpers. Did you have lucky hockey socks and things like that when you played?
Yeah. Some players do that. They've got the same pair of jocks for the game, or socks, or they've got their favourite bat.
Yeah, we have lucky bowls at lawn bowls.
There you go, see?
Definitely. I've got my lucky bowl today. Good. Does it work? Sometimes.
Do you have your lucky underwear?
No.
Some people do though.
But here's a question.
Mm.
If most superheroes start out not as an official employee and they make their own costumes, Is it a uniform or is it a lucky clothing item? It's like Superman's always wearing his, was it red undies and blue tights? That sounds like your lucky
Yeah,
undies.
just your lucky undies. Yeah, put on your lucky
Yeah.
undies to try and do something a bit
It's on the outside.
daunting, and it ended up
Yeah.
getting stuck wearing that all the time as your superhero.
Yeah.
I think.
Superman could not have existed in Australia because he couldn't possibly have worn all that rubbish underneath his clothes. Would have been kicked straight away.
Yeah, any where they just wear normal clothes and they've got the
Where's
outfit
Superman?
on underneath.
He's the one that's sweating all the time. How do you mean?
He's the one who's passed out because he's got heat
Yeah.
exhaustion because he's got all that suit underneath his day clothes.
What would you do now anyway?
What a great disguise he's got. A pair of glasses when he's normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So anachronistic things as related to superheroes, because Superman used to get changed in a telephone booth. Well, he'd be like looking and looking and looking.
There aren't any.
It's like, oh,
He
no.
can't turn into Superman because there are
Yeah.
no telephone.
So that,
And how much really would people not notice someone taking their clothes off in a
In
photo?
there. It's completely glass. Like
it'd be reported to the police.
someone
There's
would
some
phone the police
requirements.
from the next telephone booth. Excuse me, there's someone stripping
Yeah.
the phone booth on.
And he's down to his budgie smugglers. He's got blue tights underneath. It's really horrible.
And does he have shoes on? He must have shoes on. So he's got to take
Oh,
his
yeah.
shoes off because he has to change like what he has on his feet.
Actually, that would be quite comic because he wouldn't be able to get his suit trousers off over his
Over
trousers.
the shoes. No, he would have to take his shoes off to take off the suit,
Yeah,
Yeah.
wouldn't he?
I think you should shove in cravings.
All right. So let's see the date for February. So it's the 12th of February for the what must be Storytime 48, the end of our 4th year. The March story, all being well, I will be able to do in person, with potentially a small group actually present to celebrate Storytime's birthday.
Wow.
However, it would be the 12th, and that would potentially be a little bit too soon after we
Put it off.
arrive.
Put
As
off for a
I
week.
wouldn't want to get seeing people too soon after hopping off a plane. It'd be a bit of a hazard. So we might go for the 3rd week of March instead. So there's an extra week in between there. But yes, I will let you know more on that. But yeah, the 12th for February. And yeah, it is our last one of our 4th year.
Wow.
We could do a bit of a festive theme with disastrous cake things. That'd be fun. We could have a cake competition, but the cake competition is like make the one that looks the most failed but still tastes good. So you got to like make it look like it's all fallen over, or
Do we have a red theme for Valentine's? Close.
we can. Oh yeah, it's close to Valentine's. Yes. Well, yeah. Okay. So Valentine's cake disasters.
Beautiful. Sort of broken-hearted cakes.
Yeah. Your cake can look like it's a yeah.
Yes.
Not Valentine's date disasters. The
Yeah.
date goes well, but the cake doesn't.
Yeah.
It's an upside
Could
down.
be both. Date
Yeah.
disaster and a cake disaster.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Okay,
sound
we're
like
going
a
to
good.
finish because we have to have an anniversary
you
tea for these puppies.
All right. Well,
And it's in the
enjoy.
Thank you.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Lovely to see everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Sarah.
Thank you very much.
See everyone.
Great
Bye.
to see everyone.
Thank you.